My friends and I stood at the edge of the howling forest. The trees were old and twisted, like gnarled fingers reaching for the sky. An old man from the nearby village had warned us. "Don't go in there," he'd said, his voice a raspy whisper. "Especially not tonight. The blood moon rises." He told us stories of monsters, of creatures that walked on two legs and howled at the moon. Legends, he called them. We just called them silly stories. Two, our self-proclaimed leader just laughed. "Monsters? You really believe that stuff?" he asked, nudging me in the ribs. I didn't, but something about the old man's fearful eyes made my stomach churn. Two was always like this, pushing us to do things that were a little too dangerous, a little too dumb. He saw the forest not as a place of peril, but as a challenge, a dare waiting to be accepted. "We'll camp one night," he announced, his voice full of bravado. "We'll prove there are no monsters, just old campfire tales." Maya and Liam looked at each other, their faces a mixture of excitement and hesitation. I was the only one who felt a genuine knot of dread tightening in my chest. The sun was already beginning to set, painting the clouds in shades of orange and blood red. The forest seemed to swallow the light, growing darker and more menacing with every passing minute. Ignoring my protests, we pushed past the crooked wooden sign that read, "Beware." The air instantly grew colder, and a strange silence fell over us. The usual sounds of birds and insects were gone, replaced by an unnerving quiet that seemed to press in from all sides. We walked deeper, our footsteps muffled by a thick carpet of dead leaves. Two led the way, swinging his flashlight beam around as if he were an intrepid explorer. He pointed out strange rock formations and oddly shaped trees, making jokes to lighten the mood. But his laughter sounded hollow in the vast emptiness of the woods, echoing back at us in a way that didn't sound friendly at all. We found a small clearing and decided to set up our tents. The blood moon had started to rise, casting an eerie crimson glow over everything. It was huge, much larger than a normal moon, and it seemed to watch us with a single unblinking eye. "See? Nothing to be afraid of," Tu said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. He kept glancing over his shoulder, into the deep, dark woods that surrounded our tiny campsite. We built a small fire, but its flame seemed weak and small, unable to push back the encroaching shadows. The stories the old man told us started to creep back into my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The night grew deeper, and the fire crackled, its light dancing across our nervous faces. We roasted marshmallows, trying to pretend this was just a normal camping trip, but the forest wouldn't let us forget where we were. A twig snapped in the darkness just beyond our firelight. We all froze, our eyes wide. "It's just an animal," Liam said, his voice barely a whisper. But then we heard it again, closer this time. It wasn't the sound of a small woodland creature. It was a heavy, deliberate sound. Something big was moving out there, circling our camp, staying just out of sight, the air filled with a sense of dread, thick and suffocating. A low growl rumbled through the trees, a sound so deep it vibrated in my chest. It was not a sound I had ever heard before. It was guttural and full of menace. Maya grabbed my arm, her knuckles white. Tu, for the first time, looked genuinely scared. He grabbed a thick branch from the firewood pile, holding it like a club. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling. The only answer was the rustling of leaves, getting closer and closer. The blood moon bathed the forest in its ghostly red light, making every shadow look like a lurking monster, a demon waiting to pounce on its unsuspecting prey. Then the howling began. It started as a low, mournful cry that quickly rose into a terrifying, ear-splitting shriek that echoed through the entire forest. It wasn't the howl of a wolf. It was something else, something filled with ancient pain and rage. The sound seemed to come from all directions at once, trapping us in a cage of pure terror. We huddled closer to the fire, its warmth doing nothing to chase away the chill that had settled deep in our bones. We were no longer brave adventurers. We were just scared kids who had made a terrible, terrible mistake. The forest was alive, and it did not want us here. Panic started to set in. Liam wanted to run, to just bolt into the darkness, but we knew that was a terrible idea. We were lost, and who knew what was making that horrifying sound? Tu tried to keep us calm, but his own fear was visible in his wide, darting eyes. "Stay together!" he commanded, his voice cracking. The howling stopped as suddenly as it had begun, plunging the forest back into an even more terrifying silence. We held our breath, listening. The only sound was the frantic beating of our own hearts, and then we saw it. A pair of glowing yellow eyes, staring at us from the edge of the clearing. They were filled with a hunger I will never forget. It stepped out of the shadows and into the faint red moonlight. It was a monster, just like the old man had said. It stood on two legs, but it was covered in thick, dark fur. Its face was a terrifying mix of man and wolf, with long, sharp fangs dripping with saliva. Its eyes, those glowing yellow orbs, were fixed on us. It was a werewolf. It let out another low growl, a warning that sent shivers down my spine. Maya screamed, a raw, piercing sound of pure terror. Liam stumbled backward, falling over a log. Tu stood frozen, the branch he held looking like a tiny toothpick against the creature's massive, muscular frame. This was it. Our stupid dare had led us to our doom. We were paralyzed by fear, unable to move, unable to think. The werewolf took a step forward, its claws digging into the soft earth. It sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring. Its gaze swept over us, lingering on each of our terrified faces. It seemed to be studying us, judging us. I closed my eyes, waiting for the attack, for the sharp claws and teeth to tear into me. The stories were all true. The howling forest had its monster, and we had walked right into its lair on the one night we should have stayed away. The blood moon seemed to mock us from above, a silent witness to our final horrifying moment. But the attack never came. Instead, the werewolf suddenly turned its head, its ears perked as if listening to something we couldn't hear. It let out a different kind of growl, not one of hunger, but one of alarm. It wasn't looking at us anymore. It was staring intently into the dense jungle behind us, its massive body tensed and ready for a fight. A new sound reached my ears, a heavy, rhythmic thumping. It was the sound of something enormous moving through the trees, something that made the ground beneath our feet tremble slightly. The werewolf took a protective stance, placing itself between us and whatever was coming. Suddenly, I understood. The werewolf wasn't here to hunt us. It was here to protect this place. It was a guardian. The stories were wrong, or at least, they were incomplete. The real threat wasn't this creature of the moon. The true monster was still hidden in the darkness, and it was much, much bigger. The werewolf let out a ferocious roar, not at us, but at the approaching danger. It was a challenge, a declaration of war. We weren't its prey. We were just trespassers caught in the middle of a battle between ancient, monstrous forces that we could never have imagined in our wildest, most terrifying nightmares. From the deepest, darkest part of the forest, the real beast emerged. It was a nightmare given form, a creature of shadow and slime. It was huge, easily twice the size of the werewolf, with multiple spindly legs like a spider and a gaping maw filled with rows of needle-like teeth. Two glowing red eyes burned with pure hatred. A foul stench like rot and decay washed over our campsite, making me gag. The werewolf didn't flinch. It charged forward, a blur of fur and fury, and slammed into the larger monster. A terrible battle began, a chaotic symphony of snarls, roars, and the sickening sound of flesh being torn. We were forgotten, nothing more than terrified spectators to a primal war. We had to get out of there. "Run!" I screamed, finally finding my voice. We scrambled to our feet and ran, not looking back. The sounds of the monstrous fight followed us, echoing through the trees. We ran blindly, stumbling over roots, branches whipping at our faces. I didn't know where Maya and Liam were. I just ran, fueled by pure adrenaline and terror. I could still hear the werewolf's defiant howls and the other creature's unearthly shrieks. The fight sounded like it was moving, crashing through the undergrowth, getting farther away. Or maybe I was just running farther away from it. I didn't care. I just needed to escape the forest. I burst out of the tree line and collapsed onto the dirt road, gasping for air. The blood moon was still high in the sky, casting its crimson light on the empty path. I was alone. I called out for Tu, for Maya, for Liam. Silence. The forest behind me was quiet now. The fight was over. Who had won? I had no idea. Were my friends still in there? Or had they been caught by the slimy beast? Or maybe they had found their own way out and were safe somewhere. I clung to that sliver of hope, but a cold dread told me otherwise. I was the only one who made it out of the howling forest. I never saw my friends again. The police searched for days, but they found nothing. No tent, no campfire, no trace that we were ever there. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. Sometimes on nights when the moon is full, I think I can hear a faint howl on the wind. I know the werewolf is still out there. the misunderstood guardian of that cursed place. The battle is over for now, but the true monster was never defeated. The curse of the howling forest remains, waiting in the shadows. And I can't shake the feeling that one day it will come looking for the one that got away.
The nightmares started the night Two stumbled out of Hukmar Forest. He would wake up screaming, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. In his dreams he was running, always running. Giant shadowy trees with twisted branches like bony fingers clawed at his clothes. Strange glowing eyes blinked from the darkness, following his every move. He could hear a low growl that vibrated through the ground, a sound that promised a terrible end. He had been the only one to ever escape the cursed woods, but a part of him never truly left. He brought the fear back with him, clutching it like a cold, dead thing. The villagers saw the change in him. They started to whisper when he walked by. His eyes, once bright and full of life, now held a wild, haunted look. He would stare off into the distance, his gaze fixed on the dark line of trees that bordered their village. Sometimes he would flinch at sudden noises, his head snapping around as if expecting an attack. The elders would shake their heads and mutter about the curse of Hukmar. They said the forest doesn't just let people go, it marks them, it claims them. And now, they believed, the forest's mark was on Two, a creeping shadow that grew longer with each passing day. Two tried to ignore the whispers and the nightmares, but the forest's grip was tightening. He found himself developing strange habits. His hearing became incredibly sharp. He could hear a leaf fall from a tree on the other side of the village square. His sense of smell was even stronger, overwhelmed by the scent of cooking fires, damp earth, and the faint, sweet smell of fear from the villagers who avoided him. He started spending more time alone, finding the noise and company of others to be too much, too loud, too bright. The darkness felt more comfortable, more familiar. The shadows were his friends now. As the days turned into weeks, the changes became more physical. Two grew restless, pacing his small hut like a caged animal. His appetite became ravenous, yet he craved things he never had before. The raw meat the butcher prepared, the scent of blood from a skinned knee. On nights when the moon was full and bright, the urge to run, to hunt, was almost unbearable. He would lock himself in, his knuckles white as he gripped the doorframe, fighting an instinct that screamed at him to return to the deep, dark woods. The villagers watched, they whispered, and they waited. They knew the forest would eventually call its own back home. Tonight was different. Tonight the moon was not just full, it was a deep blood red. It hung in the sky like a giant angry eye, casting a terrifying crimson glow over the entire village. The air was thick and heavy, charged with an energy that made the hairs on Two's arms stand up. The pull was stronger than it had ever been before. It was not a whisper in his mind anymore. It was a roar, a physical force yanking him toward the forest. He couldn't fight it. He didn't even want to. The fear he once felt was replaced by a strange sense of belonging, a deep, primal need to answer the call. He slipped out of his hut, moving with a silence and grace he didn't know he possessed. The village was eerily quiet, the doors and windows shut tight. No one dared to be out under the blood moon. They knew what it meant. It was a night for monsters, a night for the forest to claim its due. Two didn't look back. His eyes were locked on the silhouette of the trees, their branches appearing like jagged black teeth against the red-stained sky. Each step he took felt right, as if he were walking a path he was always destined to tread. The forest was waiting for him. It was time to go home. As he crossed the threshold from the village fields into the woods, a sudden chill enveloped him. The temperature dropped dramatically and the air grew heavy with the scent of pine needles and decay. The sounds of the night, the crickets, the rustling leaves, all fell silent. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath, watching him. Red moonlight filtered through the canopy, painting the gnarled roots and twisted vines in shades of blood. Strange guttural clicks and hisses echoed from the deeper shadows, sounds that would have sent any other person running for their life. But Two was not afraid. He just kept walking deeper. The forest seemed to guide him. The path ahead was unnaturally clear, while the woods on either side were a thick, impenetrable tangle of thorns and shadows. He felt eyes on him from all directions, unseen things lurking just beyond the reach of the crimson light. He saw strange symbols carved into the trees, glowing faintly with a sickly green energy. A low mist swirled around his ankles, cold and damp, clinging to him like a shroud. The growl from his nightmares returned, but this time it was real. It was close, and it sounded like it was in pain. Deeper in the heart of the forest, in a clearing bathed in the moon's eerie red light, two found the source of the sound. There, slumped against an ancient, moss-covered stone, was a creature of nightmare. It was a werewolf, massive and covered in matted silver fur, but it was dying. Deep, ragged wounds covered its body, and its breathing came in shallow, rattling gasps. This was the beast from his dreams, the monster that had haunted him. But seeing it now, so broken and defeated, Tu felt no fear. He only felt a strange pity for the magnificent creature as its life drained away onto the forest floor. The werewolf lifted its heavy head, its golden eyes fixing on Tu. The gaze was not filled with malice, but with a weary resignation. "You came?" it rasped, its voice a low, gravelly rumble that was more thought than sound. The forest called its next guardian. The creature struggled to sit up, a pained whine escaping its throat. "I have failed. I grew weak. For centuries I have kept it contained, sealed away. But my strength is gone. When my life ends, the seal will break. A far greater evil will be unleashed upon this land, a monster born of shadow and hunger." Tu stood frozen, the words echoing in the silent clearing. Guardian? He was no guardian. He was just a boy who had been cursed by this very forest. He wanted to scream, to deny it, but a part of him understood. The changes, the instincts, the pull, it was all leading to this moment. The werewolf's eyes began to dim, the golden light fading. "The curse is also the power," it whispered, its final words hanging in the cold air. "The forest needs a protector. It needs a warden for its prison. You must be stronger than I was. You must..." The creature's voice trailed off as its massive head fell to its chest. With its final breath, a tremor shook the ground. The ancient stone behind the dead guardian cracked, a deep fissure splitting it in two. From the crack, a darkness began to pour out. It was not just the absence of light, it was a physical substance, a thick, inky blackness that writhed and pulsed like a living thing. It coalesced into a horrifying shape, a beast of shifting shadows with countless glowing red eyes and a maw that opened into a silent, soul-devouring scream. The true monster of Hukmar Forest was free. Tu felt a wave of pure terror wash over him, and he collapsed to his knees. As Tu fell, a searing pain ripped through his body. It felt like his bones were breaking and reforming, his muscles tearing and stitching themselves back together into something new, something stronger. He screamed, but the sound that came out was not human. It was a deep, guttural howl that echoed through the trees, a sound of both agony and power. His senses exploded. He could smell the fear of the shadow beast, taste the magic in the air, and see every detail of the forest with perfect clarity, even in the suffocating darkness. The curse was not just a mark, it was a transformation. He rose to his feet, no longer the boy named Tu. He was taller, broader, his form shifting between man and beast. Claws extended from his fingertips and his eyes glowed with the same golden light as the previous guardian. He looked at the shadow monster, and the terror was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory rage. This was his forest now. This was his prisoner to contain. With another howl that shook the very foundations of the woods, he lunged, a blur of motion and fury. The two nightmares clashed under the blood-red moon, and a battle for the soul of the forest began. No one ever saw Tu again. The boy who had escaped the forest had vanished from the village, leaving behind only an empty hut and a legacy of whispers. Some say he was devoured by the monster he went to face. Others, the ones who listen closely on nights when the moon is full, say he never left the woods. They say he simply answered his true calling. He disappeared from the world of men to become a ghost, a legend, a permanent resident of the dark and twisted trees of Hukmar. He became the forest's eternal jailer. The curse of Hukmar Forest continues. The villagers still bolt their doors and shutter their windows when the moon hangs red in the sky. They tell their children stories of the shadow beast that lurks in the deepest parts of the woods, a horror that can never be killed. But they also tell them of its guardian. On those blood moon nights, if you stand at the edge of the woods and listen very carefully, you can sometimes hear a long, lonely howl. It is a cry of warning, a promise of protection, and a reminder that the new guardian is always watching, always waiting.
The forest first took two. He was a boy with laughter in his eyes. He chased a butterfly with wings like stained glass. He ran past the old banyan tree that marked the edge of the village. He did not come back. The villagers searched for days. They called his name until their voices were raw. The forest only answered with silence. It was as if the trees themselves had swallowed him whole, leaving no trace, no footprint, no sign that he had ever been there at all. His laughter became a ghost on the wind, a memory that chilled the warm afternoon air. After two, others vanished. A woodcutter went to gather timber. His axe was found later, its blade buried deep in a fallen log, but the man was gone. A young woman, known for her beautiful songs, went to pick wild orchids near the stream. Her woven basket was discovered by the water's edge, filled with vibrant flowers. She was never seen again. The disappearances were quiet. They were sudden. They were like stones dropped into a deep, dark well, the ripples spreading outwards, touching every family with a cold finger of fear. The village grew smaller, not by people leaving but by being taken. The air in the village changed. It grew heavy. It tasted of damp earth and something else, something old and hungry. Doors were bolted at sunset. Children were forbidden from playing outside. The once lively market square became a place of hushed whispers and frightened glances. People spoke of a shadow that moved when the wind was still. They talked about a cold spot that drifted through the paths. Hukmar Forest, once a source of life and sustenance, now loomed over them like a predator, its green canopy hiding a terrible secret that was slowly bleeding into their world. The stories began to surface, old tales the grandmothers used to tell to scare naughty children. They spoke of a guardian spirit, a protector of the woods, but the stories had a dark side. They warned that the spirit could turn, it could become a devourer. It could become a beast if its trust was broken. The elders who had once dismissed these as mere folklore now gathered in worried huddles. They looked at the dark tree line and wondered, had they done something to awaken the anger of the forest? Had they forgotten a promise made by their ancestors long, long ago? A few came back. They were not the same. A hunter, a man known for his courage, stumbled out of the forest after 2 days. His eyes were wide with a terror that would never leave him. He did not speak for a week. When he finally did, his words were broken fragments of horror. He spoke of a sound, a growl that was not from any known animal. It was a sound that vibrated in his bones, a low rumble that felt like the earth itself was groaning in pain. He said the sound was everywhere and nowhere at once, a constant threat that followed him through the suffocating green. The physical signs were just as unsettling. Deep, claw-like gouges appeared on the trunks of ancient trees. They were too high for a bear, too wide for a tiger. The marks looked as if something immense had sharpened its nails on the bark, leaving behind raw, weeping wounds in the wood. Strange tracks were found in the soft mud by the river. They were not hoof prints. They were not paw prints. They were something else entirely. Something disturbingly intelligent in their shape, something that walked on 2 legs, but was clearly not human. The forest was being scarred by an unseen force. Those who survived the forest's embrace told of the oppressive feeling. The air, they said, became thick and hard to breathe. The familiar bird songs would suddenly stop, replaced by an unnerving, absolute silence. It was a silence that felt watchful, a silence that felt hungry. They described a feeling of being stared at by 1,000 unseen eyes, a pressure that pushed down on their shoulders and their spirits. The forest was no longer a neutral place of nature. It had developed a personality, a malevolent consciousness that played with its victims before it struck. One young woman who escaped spoke of a scent. It was the smell of damp soil and decaying leaves, but mixed with something metallic, the smell of old blood. She said it clung to her clothes and her hair for days, a phantom reminder of her ordeal. She also saw a flash of movement in her peripheral vision. A shape, she whispered, that was vast and dark. A silhouette against the leaves that was too large to be real. It was a fleeting glimpse, a nightmare made manifest for a single terrifying second before it dissolved back into the shadows of the trees. The village elders, desperate, went to the old shaman. He lived alone, his hut perched on the edge of the forest, a bridge between their world and the world of spirits. He was a man with eyes that saw more than the present. He listened to their pleas, his face a mask of ancient sorrow. He agreed to seek answers. He knew the price of such a ritual. It would take a piece of him, a toll demanded by the spirits he would commune with. But the village was his family, and its fear was a poison that had to be drawn out. He prepared the herbs, the incense, and the sacred bowl. The ritual began as the sun bled into the horizon. The shaman chanted in a language older than the village itself. His voice was a low drone, a thread of sound weaving through the rising smoke. He fell into a trance, his body swaying to a rhythm only he could hear. The villagers watched in silence, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. They saw his eyes roll back into his head, showing only the whites. He was no longer in the hut with them. He was walking in the spirit world, searching for the source of the darkness that plagued Hukma Forest. In his vision, the shaman saw the beast. It was not born of malice, it was born of betrayal. It was an ancient spirit of the forest, a guardian tasked with protecting the land. It had been one with the trees, the rivers, and the animals. But men had come. They had forgotten their pact with nature. They had chopped down the sacred trees for profit. They had polluted the streams with their waste. They had hunted its creatures not for sustenance, but for sport. The spirit's heart, once full of peace, had been filled with the poison of human greed and disrespect. The vision showed the spirit's transformation. Its sorrow curdled into rage, its form twisted from something ethereal and beautiful into a creature of nightmare and vengeance. The shaman saw its pain. He felt its profound loneliness. This was not a mindless monster. It was a betrayed god, a protector turned punisher, awakened by the constant wounds inflicted upon its domain. The disappearances were not random acts of hunger. They were a reclamation. They were a terrifying, sorrowful judgment on those who had forgotten how to live in balance with the world. The shaman collapsed, gasping, returning to his body. He tried to warn them, his voice a ragged whisper. "It is awake! It is coming!" But his warning was too late. As he spoke, a change occurred that silenced every voice and froze every heart. The sky, which had been a gentle canvas of twilight purples and oranges, suddenly bled into a deep, unnatural crimson. It was the color of a fresh wound, stretching from one horizon to the other. The world was bathed in a hellish red light, and every shadow grew long and menacing. Then the lights went out. Not just the fire in the shaman's hut, but every light in the village. The lanterns, the candles, the cooking fires, all were extinguished in an instant, as if a great dark hand had snuffed them out. A profound and absolute darkness fell over the village, a blackness so complete it felt solid. The red sky vanished, replaced by an impenetrable void. The only sounds were the frantic, panicked breaths of the villagers, huddling together in a world that had suddenly lost all light and all hope. A primal fear, cold and sharp, gripped everyone. From the heart of Hukma Forest, the sound came. It was the growl the hunter had described, but magnified 1,000 times. It was a roar that was more than a sound. It was a physical force, a wave of raw power that shook the very foundations of the earth. The ground trembled, the huts vibrated, and the air crackled with a terrifying energy. This was not the growl of an animal hunting its prey. This was the roar of a betrayed king announcing its reign, a declaration of war against the world that had wronged it. It was the sound of an awakening. The roar echoed, and then there was silence, a waiting, heavy silence. The villagers stood frozen in the suffocating dark, their minds reeling from the crimson sky and the earth-shattering sound. The beast of Hukma Forest was no longer a whisper, no longer a half-seen shadow or a story to scare children. It was real, it was awake, and it was here. As the terrified people waited for what would come next, a single question hung in the blackness, more terrifying than any roar. In the face of this ancient wrath, will a new guardian rise to protect them, or is this the beginning of an eternal darkness?